Yeah, I mean, I guess we're in the portion of the program where I get to talk about how big of an idiot I was.
Welcome to How I Made It in Marketing from Marketing Sherpa. We scour pitches from hundreds of creative leaders and uncover specific examples. Not just trending ideas or buzzword-laden schmaltz. Real-world examples to help you transform yourself as a marketer. Now, here's your host, the Senior Director of Content and Marketing at Marketing Sherpa, Daniel Burstein, to tell you about today's guest.
Content marketing has become such a crowded space in almost every industry. It's so hard to stick out. I think sometimes we have the wrong focus, right? We're trying to go viral. We're trying to get popular, but that shouldn't be the goal. The goal should be to help a relevant, ideal customer. And we've got a great story from today's guest illustrating why popular content isn't always the best content for the client or for our brands. He's got a lot of other great stories. He's going to share stories about how well-written content put together by someone who understands a business can go a really long way toward the client's success, how attention to detail in a niche especially pays dividends, and he's going to share lessons, what he's learned from the people he's collaborated with in his career. Don't go around your supervisor and don't throw your weight around as a new person. Always get the client or prospect on the phone before you give up the goods, and communicating with customers in their own language. Great lessons. Joining me today is Jonathan Fashbaugh, President of Pro Impressions Marketing. Thanks for joining us, Jonathan.
Hey, Daniel. I am really excited to be here.
Great. Well, before we jump into your story, just give us a little background about what are you working on now? What do you do?
Well, I head up a digital agency, Pro Impressions Marketing, like you said. Our client base is exclusively dentists, and that's just a niche that we kind of fell into. But our focus is just helping them find new patients on the internet through kind of all things digital, all things content. We love doing it.
That's great. And hey, if you're listening and you're not, you don't market to dentists, I think there's a lot of broad lessons here. I've worked a lot in the B2B and tech space in my career, and a lot of the things Jonathan told me, I'm like, it's very relevant to tech, software, B2B, really any complex marketing. Like this first lesson really, I think, applies to anyone. You want to tell us, you say popular content isn't always the best content for the client, which at first kind of seems wrong. Like, of course, we want to make our stuff popular, but what did you do to try to make something go viral, and how did you kind of get bitten on the neck by it, I'll say?
Yeah. I mean, so at the end of the day, dentists are local businesses. Sometimes we don't tend to think of it that way, and sometimes we end up having to actually educate the dentist about that. But a lot of marketing tactics are, all about driving traffic to the website, and at first blush, that's what we were really trying to do as well. In the heyday of content marketing, where there wasn't a whole lot of rules, we were just any idea we came up with, we were writing about. And so for one of our offices, we wrote, this was when the TV show True Blood was brand new. And so one of the articles we wrote was just about how the people on True Blood were able to make that effect where their teeth pop out, the vampire teeth. And so we wrote about how they did that on the show, but then how it's actually possible to have vampire teeth using porcelain veneers. And, we did not say, so contact our office to get vampire teeth or anything like that. But we wrote the post about how that could be done. And, it's probably not a good thing, but, that's how you could have vampire teeth if you wanted it. What we kind of didn't anticipate was people all over the country calling our client saying, "Oh yeah, I want vampire teeth. Can you do that for me?" You could be tempted to think, well, shoot, that's a customer for the dentist. Why wouldn't they want that? But their belief was that is a very bad idea for your mouth. And they certainly weren't going to hold spots in their schedule for, someone in New York to, in theory, fly in and get vampire teeth. I mean, you could probably hear crickets on the other end when those calls came in, because the front desk person was like, "What? You want vampire? No, we don't do that." So they ended up.
Great point. But sorry, for any marketer, because I hear this all the time. Oh, we've generated this many leads. Sometimes they're using kind of some questionable tactics, not even content marketing, some other tactics that I've always, find questionable. I'm like, really, that worked? And we're like, oh, we generated this many leads. We generated this many leads. And it's like, okay, what is your lead definition? And then sometimes there's a pause. Like, well, we got a name and we got a phone number so our sales team can call them. And it's like, is that really a lead? So sorry, Go on. What happened?
No, that's a huge point and something that we constantly struggle with, educating our clients and future clients when they're comparing us to other agencies. The definition of a lead is so critical because especially agencies that kind of start up and sort of dabble in dental, they'll talk about guaranteeing a certain number of leads. Well, what the dentist hears is a certain number of patients. But in the marketer's point of view, if they get a subscription to, a newsletter or sign up for a white paper, they've just delivered a lead. But the dentist is not scheduling an appointment. And that's what happened with this practice. They called us and they're like, we're getting phone call after phone call from people asking about vampire teeth. Can you please point out on that article somehow that we don't do this? And so that's what we did. Literally in bold text at the top of the article, we put, we do not offer vampire teeth as a service. And guess what happened to their call volume? It stayed exactly the same. The people still call. We were like, yeah, I'm very interested in getting vampire teeth. So in the end, we just had to take it down, even though it was a highly successful piece of content from a traffic standpoint and, a crappy lead gen standpoint. It didn't actually help grow the practice.
Well, I love that too, because banner blindness is just such an issue on so many websites. I mean, there are so many times where we felt, hey, we put something on a website, we put it up. Why are we still having questions? Just recently, so as we were talking about, our parent organization, MECLabs Institute, launched a free digital marketing course, but we had 4 older on-demand courses. The new one's free that we paid, we charged $695 for. We didn't want to take those pages down. There were old pages that were up. They had info, so we just put a clear message at the top, very clear message at the top of, hey, we no longer offer this course, but click here and go to the free course. And we'd still get messages of because we used to have the first session free on the paid courses, like, hey, watch the first session. I can't watch the rest of your sessions. I can't buy it. How do I buy it? And it's like, we mentioned it right at the top. And so what we had to do too is ultimately just take down those pages and redirect it right to the free course.
Following directions is hard.
Following directions is hard, and this is a common theme in the podcast is we are not our customers. So when we are working on our websites and our web page and all this stuff, we're just so focused on them. Our clients, websites, so we know everything on there. When we add a new banner that gives information, we're like, oh wow, this is a big new thing that people will now see. There's this new banner with this information, and they don't care. They're on their phone scrolling real quick. They've got 3 tabs open. They're listening to something. They don't notice. So we call that banner blindness. It's a very frequent problem. So one other thing I thought when I heard your story and talking about B2B technology and software companies, is there was a very prominent software company, I won't mention them, in the marketing space. And they would generate a lot of content. They'd get a lot of big audience. But I noticed their target market was business owners, small business owners, medium business owners, and their blog posts just were written by interns. And so they were very focused on all of these topics that were trending media culturally, all these things that were to maybe more of like a college age segment that really weren't really bringing in small and medium businesses who have very different focus. So that also brings up the idea of be careful who is, when we do things like blogs and social media, we think, great, we'll get the intern to do it. We'll get, the new junior marketer to do it. Make sure if they're doing it, they have a really good understanding, a really good customer theory of who they're writing to, what their pain points are, what they care about, what your company's value proposition is. I see you nodding. I think you must have run into similar issues.
Yeah, it's really difficult, especially when you're hiring new talent where they feel like they know everything about marketing, but they don't know the client. The content that comes out can be technically accurate, and from a marketing standpoint, pretty smart. But if it doesn't really address the end customer's goals or is not in line with their business model, then it's just going to be a lot of noise, and that content's not going to pull a lot of weight for them.
Yeah, I think your next story is a great example of how to solve that problem, because when you say it can be technically accurate, but it's not right. I've gotten a question before from a copywriter for overseas, and he said, "Hey, I want to be a copywriter, but I'm a non-native English speaker. How can I do it?" And I let him know, hey, we're all non-native speakers, really. Like anytime you're starting in a new industry, you need to learn to speak that language. Like when I first started in the tech industry, I worked with companies like IBM and VMware and BA Systems, and I didn't come from that background. I needed to learn that language, because I wouldn't be credible to anyone I talked on the phone with to interview or anyone I wrote to. And so here, what you did, I love this. This is such a cool way to really learn the language. You say a well-written content put together by someone who understands the business can go a very long way toward the client's success. And tell me about how you shadowed this dentist and kind of lived his life for a short time to really understand them.
Yeah, well, our very first client when I launched our agency was a dentist, and he told me that he wanted to build a website or at least add a page to his website about this new denture procedure. And then it was going to revolutionize dentures. And I said, well, that's really exciting. I know nothing about it, though. And so I asked him, well, can I go with you to the seminar? Because he hadn't actually gone to the seminar yet. And he's like, well, sure, I guess. Let me ask, and got permission to go there. And, there was a lot of stuff that went right over my head because I am not a dentist. But, was able to just glean, tidbits of things that when they were especially talking about how they talked to their patients, that to me was gold for what we would write to kind of prime the pump a little bit on what they should expect, the process involved, and the problems that it solved, and really understand that from a dentist perspective, but then as a marketer being able to translate that, into layman's terms that would still hit on those pain points. Just as an example, you typically think of old people as having these short faces, kind of smushed up faces because they're missing teeth. And
that's hard. Wait a minute, that's really cold.
I'm sorry.
Old people have smushed up faces. Okay, go on.
But what happens, what I learned at this course is that it's because those teeth have worn down over time. And so the typical denture procedure is we're going to put some teeth in your face that kind of fit your mouth, but when you lose teeth, your jawbones actually shrink. And people don't understand that. And so they'll get their dentures and technically they have teeth in, but they still look old. And this denture procedure was revolutionary because they actually factored in the bone loss and gave them dentures that restored the facial height. The vertical dimension is the technical term, but it's making people younger because they factored that in. So we were able to then describe that in layman's terms to say, you're going to have a more youthful appearance because we're going to compensate for the smushed look of your face,
No, I'll tell you why I love that, and that's beautiful. It's one of the things I love best about a career in marketing is the curiosity. I love learning about how these different industries or companies work and then getting to communicate that in a compelling way to customers. You got to be curious in this industry. And one thing I found that's really effective is just kind of sitting down and kind of picking their brains and talking to them about how their company works. So I'll give you an example. We were talking before this call. One of the things that the parent organization of Marketing Sherpa, MECLABS Institute, does is we have these quick win intensives. We have these value proposition workshops where we get in the same room for 2 days, 3 days with a specific methodology with leaders of a company, and we help them find their wins. We help them find their value prop. And the things that we do in those meetings are valuable. But what I found is really valuable is just lunch. It's like when you're sitting, when we're taking a break, we're eating lunch with them. I just love picking their brains about, well, why are you in this industry and why are you in this business and why do you do this thing? And I remember one of them, we're right here in Jacksonville, this oceanfront hotel. It was beautiful and just kind of talking. And it was really curious why they started this security company. And, there's enough security companies. Yeah, we all want to make money. Why did you start it? They were giving me this really fascinating story about how the setup they found of other security systems was so hard and the steps they took to make the setup easier, which is stuff that didn't really as much come up in our formal conversations, kind of did, but hearing that backstory of wow, that's fascinating. That's some gold there that you really have to, mind. And so you talk about going to an industry event. My God, you're surrounding yourself with those dentists. You're eating lunch with them, dinner, going to a bar. I mean, it's just kind of seeping into your pores, right?
Yeah. And I mean, the other dentists that were there, and I promised the guy putting on the event, look, I'm not going to be passing out business cards or anything. I truly just want to learn. It was during the lunches and that kind of thing where the dentist said, so you don't work in Dr. Lawrence's office? No, I don't. So, but what do you do? Well, I'm a marketer. But why are you here? And I told him, I need to know about this business so that I can write about it. So I wrote the content for this website because when I first started the business, it was just going to be me, a computer, and like 10 clients would run off right off into the sunset together. That was my business model. So I wrote this content and built this website, and it, sort of almost lost me the client because he didn't really need me after that content went live. I mean, it interacted well with the patients, and so that he got good conversions. And, obviously we optimized it for search, but, it just performed so well that, occasionally he would just take his foot off the pedal with the marketing and we wouldn't have to, do ongoing stuff. It was really at the top of the search engines until he retired and we took his website down. But I really think it was just because the content was unique to him and hit on the pieces of not just the dentures, but other aspects of what he did.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, sometimes, we think we've got the template down for the website and we'll just stick the information in. But there is this subtle difference that, customers can tell, they can feel in any industry. Like if we bathe in that knowledge, like it's going to come out through us in our writing. You can't overlook that. And another thing, and this really ties into our next story, when you have that deep understanding of the industries you're serving, you will notice things that other agencies and other marketers don't notice. I love this story. You say, attention to detail in a niche pays dividends. So, stock photos, my God, I mean, they're helpful, yes. It's been better. It's been a lot cheaper than, what marketers used to do in the old days where they'd have to have photo shoots for anything. But they could be the bane of our existence. So give us an example that happened to you.
Yeah, I mean, I was building a page for a client about dental implants. And there's a stock photo that I'd seen around on other websites. And it, when you're scrolling through stock photos looking for something to use, she was just a beautiful gal, great skin, great hair, kind of tossing her head back with a laugh on a beach, I think. And this client was in Orange County. And so I was like, this is a great stock photo. And I was putting it in. And I looked a little closer. And sure enough, this gal is missing a tooth. It's not a front tooth, so it wasn't really obvious, but it was pretty clear. As you're following the curve of her smile, there's a big old black gap in her smile. And I started going around on these other websites because, like I said, I'd seen it before. Sure enough, right on their cosmetic dentistry page, there's a gal missing a tooth. I actually used it as a sales tactic a little bit because I would contact those offices and say, hey, did you know that you have a photo of a gal missing a tooth on your cosmetic dentistry page? Maybe it's supposed to be a before. I don't know. But
make sure you're clearly labeled. Yeah, I mean, it gets into, really understanding that industry and speaking that language. So one thing I learned, in writing at Marketing Sherpa, I was, since I'm doing this 2 decades now more, I was always interested in the most advanced tactics and the most advanced things and the most complex things. And it was so interesting. And every now and then when kind of a more entry-level person, when they're starting out, I assign them to more of kind of like a 101 kind of basic topic. And sometimes those 101 basic topics would do way better than our advanced stuff. And it really made me realize, now we specifically do some 101 content just to help that. It made me realize there are people that they're just wanting to learn that industry. They're wanting to get interested and bathe in it and understand it. And I think, so for anyone engaged in content and marketing for whatever industry you're in, think about that. I'm not writing for me. You're not just writing for yourself. What are some of those basics you can give them so they can understand that industry, so they can concentrate and focus on it and notice things like a missing tooth in a stock photo?
Right, right. I mean, I'm sure that there are nuances in every industry where if you can identify either big wins or something that would be just a kind of critical but subtle failure to avoid, like maybe it's an auto business, and you want to promote them, but they don't sell foreign cars or something, then you've got to let your design team know that so that they don't choose photos that have foreign cars. Or I don't know, maybe that's a terrible example. I have to educate my designers about the type of dentistry that our dentists do so that they the missing teeth is something that I would hope that the average designer could pick up on, but there are really sexy people that have really terrible teeth, and our dentists notice it every time if we pick a stock photo that is a gorgeous photo, but they have crooked teeth or bite problems that just are like nails on a chalkboard for our docs.
Well, and that is, we've written about this before, the creative brief, the design brief. If you're, a marketing director, if you're an agency account executive, it is so important to give context, that crucial context to a designer and a writer in that design brief, in that creative brief, so they know those subtle things and they can communicate them.
Absolutely.
All right, so we talked about the things you made in your marketing career, some lessons, some stories from that. But the other key thing we do as marketers, not just make things, we collaborate with people. It's the other people. So let's talk about some of the people you learned from in your career, some of the lessons that we can give the audience. And the first person is Robert Schmachtenberger, the owner of idolum. Feel free to correct me there.
Robin Schmachtenberger, but yeah.
Robin Schmachtenberger, yeah. And you said... I love this. Don't go around your supervisor and don't throw your weight around as a new person. What mistake did you make earlier in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're in the portion of the program where I get to talk about how big of an idiot I was. But yeah, I mean, I was just a young kid, fresh out of school, and I had been duplicating CDs for a while, and then started authoring CD-ROMs. This is how long ago it was. I got them to hire me full time, and that made me feel like I was just some big shot. Got all puffed up and decided that I wanted to work days instead of nights, because that sounded like a lot more fun. And I don't know why I didn't go to my direct supervisor, but I went to Robin and was like, so yesterday I got promoted to a full-time position. I'd now like to work during the days. Just like totally oblivious to the fact that I was not really earning my, I didn't have enough clout or pull in the job at all.
Yet, right?
Yeah, I hadn't paid my dues. That's exactly it.
Yeah.
And then totally went around my boss to just ask for this big favor, and it was just like one of those things that you remember in your brain, and it's just you want to cringe every time you think about it. Like, how dumb was I? And Robin should have probably let me go on the spot. It's like, what are you thinking, man? And my direct supervisor, again, probably should have chewed me out, but they were really compassionate. I think they recognized that I just didn't know how to be a professional yet. I didn't know my limits, and I didn't know the appropriate protocol. And so Robin was very gracious and just said, I'll think about that. I'll talk with your boss, and I think his name was Bill too, and we'll get back to you. And then a little bit later, my direct supervisor was like, hey, did you go to Robin and ask to change your schedule? I said, well, yeah, I did. What? Why didn't we talk about this? And he gently but firmly said, you do not do that. That is not how you conduct yourself as a professional. So it was a great learning experience. And now as a supervisor, I try to have the same kind of compassion if someone else screws up like that and just doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, mistakes we don't want to make mistakes, but they're great because they're better teachers in college. They're better teachers in MBAs, the mistakes we made. And you can either make your own mistakes, or that's why we have the How I Made It in Marketing podcast. You can listen to other people's mistakes and learn from them. But so now you have a distributed agency, right? And
Yes.
so I assume a lot of people you hire, you might not even meet in person. You're interviewing over the Zoom. They're just working remotely. So how has that affected like how you bring them on board and teach them about a culture and all those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest challenge is the nonverbal stuff. I mean, we definitely insist on a Zoom interview at the very least, but trying to understand what kind of person we have in front of us in an awkward. I mean, interviews are awkward to begin with, but then you're sitting in front of a camera. You don't know where to look. You try to have again some compassion for that situation while at the same time knowing, is this someone that I can trust? Because I don't know when I'll actually meet them in person, and yet I'm going to be paying them a lot of money to do work for people that trust me. And it's definitely something that's a new frontier for us, and I guess the world at large. We're still learning the best way to do that.
Yeah, and another challenge with remote work is, I remember when I worked in an agency and I pitched my ideas, I had the luxury of almost always doing it in person. You're there with the people, you can engage them, you can guide the conversation, you can read them a little better. So these days, that's not always the case, and this brings us to this great lesson from, I think it's Bill Fukui, the Senior Director of Business Development at MedShark Digital, and he said, always get the client or prospect on the phone before you give up the goods. So how did that teach you about how to pitch to clients, how to pitch your creative ideas?
Yeah, I mean, that was a super formative lesson that really pressed into just not being afraid of conflict. And it's awfully easy to just fire off an email and hope for the best. And now as I'm training younger professionals, I have to insist on the same thing. I mean, we want approval on a mock-up. We want a yes to a proposal that we put together. But if you just fire that off in an email, you might as well kiss it goodbye and know that you're sort of setting yourself up for failure. It doesn't feel like it because our design teams, they work really hard on these mock-ups. We put together these proposals, hopefully with a lot of good thought into what the prospect needs and what we're offering. But then I think there's just a timid part of us that would love to get away from the situation where we're going to be told no. And it's a lot better to instead get them on the phone, walk them through, this is why we did this is why we did this, or this is why I'm proposing this, because you have this problem and this outcome that could happen if we solve it. And you're really guiding the thought process, not just presenting something, but you're helping shape the way that it's perceived by the other party. And you're going to get a lot more yeses when you do it that way, as long as you can have the emotional intelligence to say, I feel that conflict, I feel that possibility of being told no, I'm going to press into it, instead pick up the phone or insist on scheduling that Zoom meeting where I can share my screen and walk the customer through that. That it takes more work to do it that way, but it will make you more productive. It'll make you get more yeses.
I think the other challenge is when that's not your business or industry, and even sometimes when it is, you don't understand the value of the finished product. Like I'll go in and see modern art, like go and see Jackson Pollock and be like, I could do that, because you just see the painting on the wall. You don't understand the value behind it. There was a great, we had a professor from Harvard Business School, Michael Norton, who came out and spoke at one of our marketing Sherpa summits, and he had this great example, which I always loved. He does research on trust through transparency, on this idea that if people understand the process better, they'll value the product more. And he gives a great anecdote about a locksmith. And the locksmith told him, when I was first a locksmith, and someone would be locked out of their house, and I wasn't very good at it, and I'd be, take me an hour and a half, I'd be sweating, I'd be cursing, I'd be knocking. Finally, I had to kind of just break their door down to get them in, and then I'd say, okay, $150, and they'd be like, hey, no problem, here you go, because they saw the work that went into it. And he's like, I've gotten really good. In like 2 minutes, I can boop, 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 do the right things, get the door open. I'm like $150. And they're like, what? What am I paying for? And so is that idea of like the second experience is a better customer experience, right? Your door's not broken down. It's a lot quicker, but you don't see that value. And it's the same thing, I think, when we present our creative ideas. when we present our marketing ideas, whether it's to laymen like a dentist who's not used to marketing, or even to a marketing director or a CMO, like they really need to understand sometimes the process you went through and also why you made the choices you did, why we did this instead of that. Yeah, we thought of this and not that.
Yeah, for sure. It's like the other way scenario I've heard that described in is for attorneys. They're like, "What? I'm paying $400 for you to write this letter?" No, you're paying $400 for all the years I spent in law school. Knowing what to put in the letter.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So I think there was I think it was the Dale Carnegie book. There was a famous example of how to influence friends, win friends and influence people. How someone goes into a factory and they, there's this big piece of machinery that's not working, and they like take a paper clip or something and do something, and then they give like a bill for $10,000, and they're like, "What? We need a breakdown of this, an itemized bill." And so it was like, okay, the itemized bill was, paper clip $1, knowing where to put the paper clip $9,999.
Right.
So,
well, and I think just describing it, whatever you do in terms of what is actually happening for the client as the end result, it's not that this is a really special paperclip and I'm going to insert it in this specific way because that's the way it has to be done in this type of machine that is this model. No, it's your productivity was at zero and you were really concerned about this machine. You thought it was broken. It was going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars to replace, and all your productivity was being lost, and now your productivity is restored. The widgets that you make, that you sell for, $20 a piece at this volume, you are now restored in that productivity, and you didn't have to replace your machine that would have cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Here's my $10,000 invoice.
What is the resulting experience for the client? Exactly.
Yep.
Nobody wants a drill. They want a hole in the wall, right? That's a famous saying. So your last example here is something kind of we touched on earlier, but it's great. Communicating with consumers in their language. What did you learn from Jeff Haddad, the owner and a dentist at Rochester Advanced Dentistry?
Yeah, Jeff actually is a dentist that teaches dentists. He's a master marketer, and I love working with him because he totally gets the importance of marketing, but he also knows that his role is what it is and lets us do the marketing for him without, he would say it took a lot of time to earn his trust and let us do what we do. But I actually attend a lot of the seminars that he teaches, and it's just amazing to hear him teach people, other dentists again, to, they treat TMJ disorder. That's a big thing for them. And in doing so, they use this machine. It's called a K7. It's by a company called Myotronics, and it has this jaw tracking software where you put a magnet on their teeth, and they're opening and closing their bite, and they're tracking how these muscles are firing using EEG stuff, the same thing that they use to track heart monitors. So there's a lot of science that goes into this, and these dentists are just eating it up, getting really excited, spending a lot of money on this technology. And so the process that these dentists go through ends up with them wanting to lead with that. Going back to the paperclip analogy or paperclip analogy of to talk about the amazing paperclip and all these details. And Jeff's like, no, this is all you tell them. This is a bite computer. It's helping us to understand how hard your muscles are working when you open and close your mouth. And so we're going to use this bite computer to understand where your jaw is most comfortable. We're going to measure your EEGs and make sure that the masseter muscle and the sternomastoid are firing and the same time with this amount. He gets them to use the language that is most accessible to the patient and to help them understand the value of what they're doing without getting into the nuances that the patient doesn't care about.
Yeah, speak their language. I mean, honestly, the same is true, I'd imagine, in the medical industry and many other industries for search, right? So we saw an example with IBM where they were using their branded terminology, smarter workforce, right? And they weren't getting good results in search, people clicking through. When they changed to talking about HR analytics, human resources analytics, that's actually what people were looking for. So it's kind of getting out of our own heads, either our branded terms, our technical terms, our medical terms, and understanding what does it mean to the customer? How do they communicate?
Yep. And tying it back to the pain points too, I think is the critical thing. I mean, in the case of TMJ disorder, that's literally what they have is pain, and saying,
that's a pain point,
you customer, we understand that you're in pain, and we have helped hundreds of patients just like you get out of pain, get out of the lockjaw scenario and the popping and the clicking and the neck pain through the use of our treatment. So we'll use a bite computer, we'll treat your jaw to get you to the right position, and then you'll be living a life without pain. And at no point did they mention the brand of the computer and the details involved, because they don't want to confuse them or scare them. It's just all about the patient journey.
Great. That's great. Yeah, it reminds me of an old Jerry Seinfeld joke. He talked about being in the airplane, and then the pilot gets on, is like, I'm going to take it up to 10,000 feet. Then I'm going to go to 5,000 feet. I'm going to do that and this. And Jerry is like, that's great. As long as we get to the place on the ticket, I'm good. I don't know how you do it. Just get me to the place that it says on the ticket.
Right.
So thanks for your stories, Jonathan. Here for some final parting words for our audience, I want to ask you, what are the key qualities of an effective marketer? What would you leave our audience with?
I would say that, understanding beyond the marketing, where the marketing ends and the business begins, understanding where that handoff happens, and get involved, in at least understanding it, if not influencing it. We recently had a review on Google from one of our customers that said Pro Impressions has changed the way that we interact with our patients. And I was just like, oh my gosh, that is like a beautiful thing to hear to say. And, that doesn't have to do with marketing in terms of lead gen, but it has everything to do with what we get paid to do, which is put butts in chairs. And so if you don't understand the full process, the full sales funnel, and move beyond your little portion of it, you can end up being held accountable for something that's outside of your control because you never took the time to understand the full process and point out potential, pitfalls.
That's great. I think it gets back to kind of the original thing we talked about in this episode was understand what a lead is, right? Because if it's just a name and an email address and a phone number and you're just throwing it to someone else, you're like, my job is done, you're not going to be that effective. So, well, thank you so much for your time, Jonathan. Really appreciate you joining us today.
Absolutely. Really glad to be here, and I can't wait to listen to more of the Marketing Sherpa podcast, because I've already listened to so much. Learned so much from Michelle Burrows and some of the other interviews that you've been doing.
Awesome. Well, thanks for that mention. Thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you for joining us for How I Made It in Marketing with Daniel Burstein. Now that you've gotten inspiration for transforming yourself as a marketer, get some ideas for your next marketing campaign from Marketing Sherpa's extensive library of free case studies at marketingsherpa.com. That's marketing, SHERPA.com.